This is the Creative Market Free Goods Roundup for the week of November 24th, 2014. There are 6 different free goods this week, but they are free this week only. So if when you're watching this video, any of these items look like something you might have use for, be sure to check out the description of this video where I'll place links to each one of them. So I'm going to start at the top here with SoBrush, which is the font. This download includes 2 different font files in TrueType font format, this regular version as well as this italic version right there. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit closer so we can get a little bit better look at these letters up close. The overall brushed effect reminds me of the different paintbrush style brushes that are included inside Adobe Illustrator, but if I zoom out a little bit, you can see that it pulls off the overall brushed effect very nicely. I think it does a pretty realistic representation of a handmade brush feel. And if I highlight over this and go to Type and then Glyphs, just to check out all the included characters, there are quite a few different special characters included, but not all of them. For example, there's no hashtag symbol, but if you want to make a custom hashtag symbol, I'd suggest perhaps taking the I from this letter set right here, outlining it, and then you can go ahead and make a custom hashtag by just overlaying those. But there's a regular version right here, as well as an italic version right here, so it's cool that both of those are included in this pack if you want a little bit of versatility that way. And I also went ahead and just typed out Free Goods Roundup so you can kind of see how this looks when you actually type out this font. It looks really nice. I think it pulls off the handmade, painted feel pretty nicely, and I think it would work well on a project where you want to give it that handmade feel. Perhaps if you have a design or illustration where you want to have the text look like it was painted on a sign or something similar to that, this might come in pretty handy. But if you think you'll have any use for this font on any projects that you're working on, pick it up and check it out. Next up is 22 subtle vector textures. The included file formats for these textures are an Adobe Illustrator file as well as EPS files. So I'm going to scroll through these textures so we can take a look at it while I talk about them a little bit. And they're subtle because a lot of them are very small in terms of the actual size of the elements. If I zoom in a little bit closer, you can get a little bit closer look at how these actually appear up close. And some of them give a subtle appearance because they're a little bit more sparsely populated. For example, this one's a little bit more sparsely populated, whereas this texture has a little bit more coverage. And I think a lot of these textures work really well on their own, but you could also mix and match and combine these different textures. So if you want to overlay 2 or 3 of these textures on a given design, I think because the coverage is pretty slight on most of them, that would actually work pretty well if you want to go ahead and do that and make them a little bit less subtle and have a little bit more aggressive texture appearance on the project that you're working on. But overall, there's a pretty nice selection of different textures here, ranging from very subtle to a little bit more apparent depending on which one you are working with. And since they are vector, that means you can scale them as big or as small as you want without losing any quality. And when you're dealing with something like a texture, that's always a really nice big plus, that you don't have to really worry about the overall texture file being too small for the project that you're working on. But there's a nice collection here of 22 different textures to pick from. And remember, like I said before, I think these would work particularly well if you want to mix and match and combine multiple textures on one project to make a custom effect. But if you do think you'll have use for these vector textures, be sure to pick them up this week while they're still free. Next we have Merry Christmas illustrations. The included file formats for these illustrations is EPS as well as JPEGs, and I have the EPS files open in Illustrator here to show them. And I actually think this might be my favorite item this week because these illustrations are just hilarious to me. I really enjoy these deer in particular. They're just super fun, and with Christmas right around the corner, I think this will come in really handy to a lot of people. So I just selected a few different items from this pack to show, but there's a ton of stuff in this, so I really recommend that if you like this style, you actually download the pack and check out everything that's included. But the actual illustrations have a nice amount of versatility. Like if I zoom in on this deer here, look at these lights in particular. Although this is a very cartoony and stylized illustration, the actual glow effect is handled very nicely on these lights on this deer's antlers, so I think that's a really cool little bonus that, although it's a stylized illustration, small effects like the glow on these lights is pulled off really well. And also with all these different files, you can go ahead and just pull off certain elements, like if you want to use this dot pattern or select the actual dot pattern and the background to use on a different project, you can do that. You could also just grab this Merry Christmas bubble right here and move that around and just use this element on a project if you want to do that. And another cool bonus with this is that there's a bunch of different included ribbons and badges, and the type on these is merged down, it's flat, so you can't easily edit that, but that shouldn't be a huge problem as it probably says what you want it to say anyways. But if you do want to add some custom text on these, you can just go ahead, move the type off, and then type out your own custom text over it. And this last image here is probably my favorite of the bunch because I just really love this Christmas tree. He just looks so happy. I also love the Santa illustration. There's actually a ton of different Santa illustrations in this pack, and you can just use this Santa illustration on its own if you wanted to. Same thing goes for the deer right here. So remember, with all these, you can mix and match elements from all these different pages. And as I said before, there's an absolutely huge amount of different illustrations in this pack. So if you enjoy this illustration style, this is a huge recommendation from me. For example, this image right here, you could just copy and paste this right on top of a Christmas greeting card or something similar to that, and you'd have a really fun and lighthearted piece to show off for Christmas. So a huge recommendation for me on these illustrations. I think they're a ton of fun, and I highly recommend that you download these this week while they're still free. And these bottom 3 goods are free on Facebook. To get them, just hit this free on Facebook button, like Creative Market on Facebook, and then a download link will appear. It's really fast and easy to do. So first up here is 3 seamless wood grain patterns. This file includes a whole bunch of different file formats, including Illustrator, EPS, JPEGs, and Photoshop pattern files. And also included is a really handy PDF guide of how to use the Photoshop pattern files, so that's really cool that that is included. And all these seamless repeating patterns are very stylized pieces of wood, and I went ahead and just repeated one of them over here on the side, so that you can see that the actual seamless repeat works really nicely. There's no weird edges or obvious repeats, so it's always a really nice big plus when you're working with seamless patterns, that it's not too easy to tell that it's actually a pattern and not just a large image. So I'm going to go to the second wood pattern here, and I think this particular wood pattern is my favorite of the bunch because it's heavily stylized and very simplified, but it still does a really nice job of conveying the wood feel. I think this would look very nice overlaid over a very simple colored background with perhaps some texture type over the top. I think this could really set something like that apart quite nicely. And here's the third wood pattern. This one's also very simplified and very stylized, but it has a whole lot more of that typical wood texture than the previous example had. So all 3 of these look really great. And like I said before, I think they would all look really nice overlaid over a very simple colored background, and then placing type or silhouetted illustrations over the top might make for a really cool effect on these. But if you think you'll have use for any one of these 3 different seamless repeating wood patterns, pick them up while they're still free, and hopefully you can get a whole lot of use out of them. Next up, we have Vector Watercolor Speech Bubbles. The set includes 9 different watercolor speech bubbles, and the included file formats are EPS, JPEG, as well as PNG. In the EPS file that I have open right here, it has type overlaid over these speech bubbles, but you can ungroup it and remove that type if you want to. And a really nice touch to this particular set is that on the JPEG and PNG versions, they don't have the type overlaid over here, so it'll be a lot more easy to customize the type on a flat version like that. So it was really smart that they chose to do that. But I'll just zoom in a little bit closer here so you can take a look at how these watercolor effects look up close. Up close you can tell the overall coloration on these looks very abstract. There's a whole lot going on there, but when you zoom out a little bit further back, it does a nice job of pulling off that overall watercolor feel. And like I mentioned before, the EPS version is the only one that has the type overlaid like this, so if you do want to use any of these particular type elements, you can open them up and then just ungroup them and move the type around or change the type colors depending on what it is that you want to do. But this pack is very straightforward. There's 9 different speech bubbles to choose from, so if you have any projects in mind where you think these might come in handy, pick them up this week while they're still free. And last we have Cantix, which is a 1-page Bootstrap HTML theme. This is a Bootstrap HTML theme, and if you're not familiar with what a Bootstrap HTML theme is, it means that it's really built to be responsive, so it should look good on no matter what device you happen to be using. But do keep in mind that since this is an HTML theme, you will need at least basic coding knowledge to go in there and change the text and images. So if you want a theme that's super easy to go in for someone that doesn't have that knowledge, a WordPress theme might be a little bit better. But if you do have a basic level of HTML knowledge, this might be a really cool theme for you. It's a 1-page parallax scrolling theme, which means it loads as one page and then you can scroll up or down as much as you want to go through all the different pages, but I could also hit a button on the top menu here and it will just automatically scroll down to that particular page. In this case, it's the services page, but there's a bunch of different sections here, and there's also a lot of subtle animations, so as I scroll down here, watch for things loading in and having special effects. There's a lot of cool stuff like that, and these buttons right here, you can just scroll through these and have different images load in if you want to. There's a pricing table that you typically find with something like a subscription service or any kind of tiered plan like that. This could be very helpful if you do run a service that's similar to that. Here's a nice page to display your team members if you run a business and you want to show off who's working for you. And this awesome skills page, as you can see right here, it loaded in these bar graphs with the cool animations, so that's a neat little bonus to this particular theme. There's a testimonial section with different images for different people. When you click on an image, a custom testimonial loads up right here. There's a showcase your work or portfolio section right here, so I'm going to scroll down so we can see how this works. As you can tell, there's different buttons here for different types of things you want to show off, so if you click on that, it'll automatically just load in whatever that particular element is. There's an Our Client section where you can display people who you've worked for, as well as a nice little call to action section right here where you can either have people contact you or buy the item right now. And then at the bottom here we have a map as well as a contact section, and then the social buttons that you come to expect. So very nice 1-page parallax scrolling theme. The menu's a nice way to navigate around, and everything seems to work really well. I didn't run into any bugs or glitches while using this, so that's always nice to see. But if this theme looks like something you might have use for, and you do have a basic level of coding knowledge, I recommend that you pick it up, play around with it, and see if it suits your needs. So that's it for this week's free goods, and do remember they are free this week only. So if any of these items look like something you might have use for, be sure to check out the description of this video and grab them this week while they're still free. And if you found this video helpful, please like and favorite, and if you want to see this video every week, please subscribe. This video is released every Monday to let you know what's free this week on Creative Market. Thanks for watching.